And here we are. Hi, Daniel.
Hey Cam, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm going to go ahead and assume I have this all set up correctly. And let's take a look at this. But yeah, welcome to our second actual Standard RV live stream. Today I'm joined by another test double agent, Daniel Huss. And I guess first things first, I'm going to introduce the project. So Standard is a Ruby style guide with linter and automatic code fixer. It's a rule set for the Ruby linter RuboCop. So the main purpose of Standard is to prevent bike shedding. So if you haven't heard the term bike shedding before, it's the idea that when presented with a large, complicated project like your Rails application, for example, people will naturally gravitate toward fighting over trivial things instead. So instead of your Rails application where you're actually making something that's useful, you're going to start fighting over line length or whatever. The original story is that they're trying to build a nuclear energy plant, and instead they're fighting over the color of the bike shed outside. In standard,
This week, you and I discovered that we like to argue over which order controller actions should be
oh yeah,
done in. So
yeah,
we
we
don't have to
will
worry about
return
that.
to that actually, because RailsConf is coming up. In standard, we choose Rubocop rules, which is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be choosing them hopefully in a way that's conservative, deliberately paced, and makes sense to everyone, especially the two of us right now. And if you don't like the rules that we chose, you can always choose your own configuration, of course. Standard is definitive, and reality is frequently inaccurate. Now, I wanted to introduce Daniel. Um, so, yeah, Daniel is a senior software consultant, just like I am at Test Double. He's coming up on 1 year at TD in May, so congratulations. And
Yeah, it's flown by.
yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I know you have it here. Your first career. I did not know this about you, so.
Yeah, when I was a teenager and into my like mid 20s, I did work. I worked in restaurants. I was a professional cook. Did some front of house stuff too, but that was my first career was love for food, which is fortunately how I convinced my wife to marry me because I'm good at cooking. So that was totally worth it. After that, I did a Bachelor of Arts in Communications and worked at a tech company in Calgary. I live in Canada, Calgary, Alberta, near the mountains. It's beautiful. Feeling really thankful for that piece of it. And
Yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
they made the transition into software.
That's really cool. Yeah, I took a much more traditional path in the software, so I'm always happy to, meet. There's a lot of people in Test Double who have like a similar career change in their recent past.
Yeah,
So
there's no one way, right?
yeah, turns out the code doesn't care. But yeah, another thing that's coming up is next week is RailsConf, and let me quickly go over to the browser. One thing that's cool is we have a lot of people who will be at RailsConf this year giving talks, and there's also going to be the Test Double office hours. So if you're going to RailsConf, find some of the many Test Double people that you can find. But
Including
first and
me.
foremost, Daniel, you're delivering a talk called The End of Legacy Code, and I would love
I
to hear more
am.
about that.
The Everybody is going to work on a project in their life that is not necessarily the most fun, and you're going to hit code that feels gross and icky. I think we've a lot of us have had that experience. I think fewer people get the experience of I just get to work on a really amazing fresh code base that's like super well compartmentalized and modular. So the TLDR, we're not actually going to get real legacy code, but we can change our mindset about how we approach it, and that will help us win the battle and the whole war.
So close. I thought we were
So
finally
that'll be
free.
the yeah, so close. We will be one day, I think. Maybe not in our lives
But
though.
yeah, and yeah, another thing that I wanted to actually, now that I think about it, point out about our RailsConf time is this session here. Justin and Megan will be doing a session like this where everybody in the room will be able to help configure the Rubocop Rails plugin, which is not actually part of standard right now, but it will be. And you can make your voice heard, talk to them about Rubocop Rails. I know they're aiming for lots of lively discussion, so it should be a lot of fun.
I'm really looking forward to it.
And that's how we found out that we disagree about whether or not there should be any enforcement on, was it controller actions?
Yeah.
I can
That's
see
a
the
discussion
value.
for a different day.
I don't know. I'm not going to RailsConf, so you're going to have a lot more sway on this.
I will win by default, Cam. You can't take this
At
from
least
me.
over me.
That's right. Maybe not over the people who are going to pull the trigger on it, though, right?
They say if you don't vote, you can't complain. So there you go. Yeah, I was wondering, have you ever used standard RB?
I have been trying to convince clients that I've worked at to use it. I use it on my local as a guidepost when there's no company decision or other folks at the team don't. I'll use it to drive my own decisions. It's been super valuable in that way for me. I think the more stuff I can offload from my own brain and not make decisions about, the better. And you can focus on the problems that we're working on. So, yeah, I would like to convince more people to use this as a tool. I think it helps us focus on the important conversations. For now, not successful getting it into new applications, but that is okay. We can show the way.
Yeah. And I don't like configuring stuff personally, so I'm always surprised when a company has all of Rubocop configured and is not just taking advantage of us doing the work for them of configuring decent standards for standard. So a quick kind of like overview of the process. There are 3 new rules in Rubocop. We're going to be updating to 1.50.2, and that is going to end up in standard 1.27. So cool. And generally, the kinds of things that I like to think about as we go through these different rules is, again, kind of a conservative nature. The default should be probably not enabling a rule. And then, yeah, trying to get into like questions about the rule itself. So why was this made in the first place? Do we think it's useful? Do we think it's going to be noisy in code bases? And then finally, should we add it? So let's use that as kind of a template to go through the discussion. And what happened to my editor? See what happened here.
Is your editor ghosting you?
My computer restarted overnight. I've sent the error report to Apple, where I'm sure they're going to get right on it.
They will email you today and say, "We're so sorry for interrupting the standard stream."
Tim Cook has his top men on it. All right. So here we are in standard. First, that was what I was hoping to avoid, is all this noise over here. So let's run S.
I've been able to work with you on a client for a bit now, so I'm getting used to flying around in Vim. But I will also say that it's always magical watching Vim users do their wizardry at the keyboard while they're navigating code bases.
Yeah, if you're ever interested in any of the Vim stuff, I can always show you how this works, like why all that showed up. Okay, we're on Rubocop 152. Let's okay. And if we run bundle exec break, that will update, yeah, all the things that are not currently configured. The big problem with using Vim is you end up with muscle memory that's useless in other situations. Cool. File. What happened here? Oh, it didn't add it to the file. Okay. For an unrelated reason. So yet again, since there's another failing test, won't be able to release live on air, but by the end of the day, it will be released with our changes. And let's start with the style/data inheritance rule. Okay.
So this is where we'll go look at the cop and say,
yeah,
what are they doing?
Here we are. This is the style data inheritance rule. So first things first, doesn't exist before Ruby 3.2. So that's totally fine in standard because we have different Ruby versions supported. We have a lot of different configurations. We only support the Ruby versions that are, actually supported by the Ruby core team, which I think is that 3 and up now?
If it's not yet, it's soon, right? Well, yeah, we're around the time where it should just be 3 and up.
Yep. So we know that before, actually, I should make a new config for Ruby 3.1. Just make sure that this is disabled.
So what's the idea here then is that for every version that you are working on, you'll have the minimum version and it starts that in bringing that cop in. And then from there on, it will enact those rules.
Yeah, so exactly.
Cool.
And in this case, it inherits from base.yaml. And so if you're on Ruby 2.7, you're not going to have to worry about this because it cascades down. So Ruby 3, instead of base.yaml, it's going to inherit from Ruby 3.1 now. And if we go one lower, this inherits from Ruby 3.0 and so on and so forth.
Very cool.
Okay. And now style data inheritance. Back to the browser. Okay, so it checks for inheritance from data.define to avoid creating the anonymous parent class. I'll admit that doesn't make it. I mean, I can see the example here. So they have a class person that inherits from data define, first name, last name. But I'm not sure.
Now, the reason this is a 3.2 thing is because data was added in 3.2, I believe, right? That datum class.
Ah, thank you for that. Yeah. So yeah, it wouldn't work at all. You shouldn't have this code, I guess, in anything.
You won't have this class to worry about.
But let's go to Robocop. Because I'm not really clear on, oh boy. I want to see why they, okay. A little more legible for everybody. So there's already a cop named struct inheritance, where when you inherit from a struct, Okay, I see. It creates this anonymous class in the middle here.
Which I
Yeah,
know JavaScript likes anonymous functions, but do we love having anonymous classes in our class hierarchy in Ruby? I don't think so.
it would really mess up a stack trace, I imagine.
Sure, yeah. I took a peek at this before we started the stream and I was thinking about, okay, is there a world where you would want to have an anonymous class? I haven't come across that, but also might just be a lack of experience.
Hmm. I guess then the question is, would you want to have an anonymous class made for you? I can't really think of the point of having a class in the class hierarchy like that is so then you can modify it and get its like thus modify its children, right? And take advantage of object-oriented programming that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if what situation would you do that in? If you're doing that with an anonymous class that was just automatically generated by Ruby because you use this syntax instead of equals. I mean, you've gone into space. I don't. You rule your own life. I don't think this is a.
We're not here for you. Yeah, no, I think there's when we're working with like structs, that's a piece that helps us. You know, if we want some kind of throwaway class that we don't necessarily want to use outside of whatever is wrapping that class where that's defined. I think that's kind of what we're leaning on is these throwaway pieces. And I believe the purpose of the data class is to have kind of a throwaway class that does keep a little bit of state around for us. So the usage of it being like implicitly anonymous because of a how it's defined seems like it might be a bit of an erroneous claim, but like the role that it's filling, yeah, it feels like you wouldn't want to necessarily have that. You
Right.
don't want that anonymization.
It's just in there, you know. So actually, another thing that would be
People can
interesting is you
add us
probably.
on YouTube, I guess.
Yeah,
Sorry,
exactly.
they can add us later and say, "Here's where you want to use this anonymized class." Maybe we're just not in the know, Cam.
Yeah, and actually, my whole code base completely depends on this. Well, there's actually another. I wonder what we have for struct inheritance. In the end, struct inheritance is not enabled.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I'll admit I'm
Did,
currently leaning toward this should be enabled because I don't see the point of this anonymous class in the middle.
okay, something I can think of is data is a new class. It's something that's brand new to the language. Do we want to really start enforcing behaviors around it while people are trying to figure out its best use cases, where it should live, how to like we don't want to like limit creativity around what's happening with that tool. Maybe this is limiting in some way.
In some way, I guess it's always easier to be permissive and clamp it down later. But yeah, I'm wondering if this is even going to be an issue for anybody. So do we mirror what we have for struct inheritance and leave this cop out, or get rid of this anonymous class and let people use whatever syntax that they want?
Maybe this is where we would want to draw on principles. You said that we want to enable things that are pure bike shedding, but we want to stay away from heuristics where people are deciding how to utilize the language.
Yeah,
Does that drive
yeah,
your
that's a
thought
good point
process at
here.
all?
And I mean, if somebody really wants to do this, I guess there's not really a reason to get in the way. So we're thinking have it disabled. I'm kind of leaning that way now. It's not super important to me, and I don't think it's going to come up anyway. but it's certainly a thing. What do you think, Daniel?
It's
Yes
one of
or
those
no?
things that like I'll go with you on the no for now. It feels
All right.
like if we're not doing it on structs, then we want some consistency probably.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a world where we want to enable the struct inheritance cop and this one for like it's a 2-for-1 kind of decision, it feels like,
Yeah.
given how similar structs and the datum object are supposed to be.
Yeah. I'm gonna write that down as a note.
Oh no, are we adding to-dos?
I'm adding a to-do for myself. Maybe we'll throw it into the testable so I can get some more. We'll find out that someone's company is entirely relying on a pattern involving struct and date inheritance and anonymous class monkey patching or something. All right. For
Hey,
now,
if you can dream it, someone has done it, right?
that's exactly. Okay. The next cop up is going to be redundant line continuation. So how about you read that one out while I type it up into the thing?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Hang on, I
If
will
you
pull
can,
it
it
up
might be too small.
on my browser so that I'm not dependent on you. I wasn't prepared, Cam.
Oh, no worries. We can all watch me type anyway. Usually there's a little tool that does it. But here we go. So it checks for redundant line continuation. What a well-named rule. This cop marks a
Right,
line
it says in the
continuation
box.
as redundant if removing the backslash does not result in a syntax error. However, a backslash at the end of a comment or for string concatenation is not redundant and is not considered an offense. It's considered safe. So in RuboCop, that means that it's not going to give you false positives, and it supports autocorrection. So let's take a look at some of the examples. So this is something that's considered to be broken. So foo./bar and then the reference and things like that. Yeah, these are things where without the slash for the line break, it would work exactly the same, right?
Yeah, it's the same invocation either way.
Same thing here, parts of an array. But in a string, that will be an actual line break and be important. Wait, no, this is good. I don't know why you would write this.
Yep, same. That's exactly what you said.
Oh, okay. I do like being right. But okay.
Yes. Okay, I've never seen anybody write a method chain that has line breaks with a slash.
Yeah, that was the not having the slash seems a lot neater. And I don't think I've seen people do that either. I've seen this pattern a lot, like with the dots lined up instead of having this and.
Yeah. Yeah, that one I've seen both, right? People like the indentation, people like anytime there's indentation involved, people can have a really good disagreement about it.
But we are not talking about the left side. We're talking about the right side of this.
Absolutely.
Where these slashes they don't seem to add much.
Like, to be honest, if I were to come into a code base and see that, it would actually make me second guess. Like, oh, is there something going on with how, like, with this? What's happening here? That feels really unfamiliar to me.
That's a good point. So, do you think this is more idiomatic to not have those slashes there?
It's how I use Ruby. It's how it feels most common to me. I would lean towards a yes on this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not gonna not take yes for an answer here. I agree entirely. I think this is more idiomatic. I've never seen slashes on the end like that, except for mainly in shell scripts. When I think about it, not in Ruby or in JavaScript for that matter, which is the other place where you see a lot of the dots. All right, we try and keep these alphabetized. That's the
Alphabetized?
word.
Nice.
And there was no version problem here. It's enabled. We made it.
We've done it.
The next one coming up is a lint rule.
Drum roll.
Duplicate match pattern. So let's figure out where that goes in here. Okay, another required Ruby version. So let's go ahead and cover our bases, because now we know that in Ruby 6, it should be disabled. All right. We have a safe cop, so no false positives. It supports autocorrection. It does not. So this isn't going to change anything anyway. Not automatically. What will happen is it'll tell you in your editor or something like that that there's a problem, or in the output when you run standard. So it checks that there are no
Whatever
repeated
environment that's in.
patterns used in keywords. Okay.
Okay, so we're talking about cases only, hey?
Mm-hmm. And if you have two ins in a row, or I guess two ins in general, that use the same condition, then that's bad.
Okay. Okay, I have a question about. I assume we're blindly trusting that the cop works totally perfectly. There might not like that it's really well tested. That that's a safe assumption.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's what
Because
that's what they say when they say it's safe, is no false positives.
cool.
At least I guess there could be false negatives, but that's safe-ish.
Safer, sure. Yeah, okay. Because I'd be curious about like if you're is this just for strings? Is it for other evaluations? Okay, yeah, let's look at some more examples maybe.
Yeah, so repeated alternate patterns with the same conditions. So this is considered bad. Yeah, don't depend on the order. So
Okay, so
even
the
though this
same
is foo or
case where we
bar,
have foo and bar.
yeah, these are considered the same. I guess let's look at some more examples. Repeated hash patterns with the same condition. I get it. I mean, these conditionals are functionally the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I don't know about you, but I'm seeing these things and they look like different lines to me, and that seems like something that should be meaningful.
How does in parse that line? Like, I'm actually not familiar with seeing like an object comparison there. Is it like is it instantiating a unique object on each of those lines? The first one is one object, and then in the second in example, it's its own object. It just happens to have the same values.
I am not 100% sure on how that works. This is the same thing, array patterns. I'll admit, this whole thing gives me kind of the heebie-jeebies.
Okay, so on the upside, they're sort of enforcing order in the array. So they're like saying array 1 is different than array 2 because of the ordering. So that would be a question I was going to have.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Because these are different arrays.
Yeah. I get the point, or I get the gist of like, hey, we're going to catch. You've got this condition that's trying to do the same thing in two instances. Like, is that really what you meant to do? Can we combine these into a single case statement?
In terms of like the semantics, I can imagine someone putting together a case and taking advantage of like the fall through in cases and things like that to just give it more meaning by having, I mean, who knows how long this little block here would be, but maybe you want to reiterate that this is a conditional for it and then have another thing that happens.
To prevent, this is really going to prevent that fall through behavior, isn't it?
Well, I think the first thing that gives me pause in the examples is the fact that this is different, right? But they're not auto-correcting at this point. It's just going to tell you that you have duplicate matches. So it's like a soft touch, but I tend to worry about these that like someone's going to want to put in an autocorrect later.
But like, how would you autocorrect it? Like, what are you going to change the string to? What are you going to autocorrect it? Yeah, that's a no-go for me, is if it's going to try to fix it automatically.
Yeah, and if we enable this and there's never an autocorrect, what's going to happen is there will be an error that it tells you about. You know, that you have this conditional twice, and maybe you decided to do that on purpose for some semantic reason. I don't know.
That does feel weird to me about like, why would we intentionally rely on fall through behavior? But okay, here's another example I can think of, or an example I can think of where maybe you're wanting to evaluate on one object in different ways. Like if foo and bar both are evaluating like maybe a numbers in a range or something, and the ranges are slightly different, and maybe the order matters or something. I'm having a hard time coming like with a really concrete way of phrasing this, but maybe for some reason you do want to lean on that ordering where it looks the same sort of in this evaluation in our case statement, but we've done some other cleverness in our evaluator. Okay, now that I've said that, it feels like a lot of this stuff is like a more human touch code review type of decision to be made. Someone looks at your code and says, oh, I see you've got the same evaluator here. Let's talk that through. Or you've done this on purpose. Why are we doing it? Can we be more clear? Is this the job for the robot to say these evaluators are wrong because they're the same?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that is a good thing to land on, at least for me, is that a lot of this kind of feels like there might be a reason, and generally it should be a conversation more so than, you know, this is like bad. This is against the rules. Because I've written a fair amount of code where it's not necessarily like patterns per se, but it'll be like if statements, or in Ruby, you know, like the after if. I feel like there should be a word for that suffix.
After if.
A conditional at the end of the statement, and I'll repeat those because I think it's more meaningful line to line. You know, like this method is called because of this. So that's a pattern that I wouldn't want to let go of here.
Bar.
Yeah. And then on the next line, if foo, then baz. And maybe there's a just because those methods happen to do different things. So I think that there's some value in repeating the conditional, and I don't want to let go of that anywhere, including in this case statement.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, because I think my default would be if I'm intentionally recreating or if I'm intentionally reevaluating that same condition, I will do so explicitly and not in a case statement. But maybe there are people that like lean on case statements the same way.
It could be.
It's not what I would do, but I could see people wanting to do that.
Okay, so what do you think? Do we enable this and tell people this is bad code? I could understand the warning too.
Yeah, like I'm not against it, but I'm not sure I can confidently just say, yeah, don't ever do this ever. There's never a use case for repeating
Yeah.
a conditional in a case statement.
So I'm thinking this is disabled. How about you?
I'll agree with you on that one.
Okie dokie.
Maybe I'll regret that one day. I'm looking forward to somebody calling us out and saying, no, 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 you should never do that.
That would be the best case scenario. I've been on the editor this whole time. I thought I was on the browser.
Oh, oops.
Yeah, I need to
We
get
were
one of
looking at the
those
browser.
thingamabobbers.
Why don't we
Hotkeys.
flip back and look at the examples that we were talking about,
Yeah, to
and maybe
run
we
through
could post a link to that.
these examples here. These are match statements that are, exactly the same. In this case, it's two strings, so it's like really obvious. But then later on, it might not be quite as obvious. So you could be looking at a hash pattern that is ordered differently, and you got to imagine that this is probably more complicated than this. Array patterns are different because, or no, these array patterns are exactly the same. It's these that are different because they're different orders, and order matters in arrays. So it seems like it'll do a pretty decent job of avoiding false positives, but as Daniel and I were just talking about, there might be a decent reason for doing things this way, and those might be valuable. At least for me. But yeah, I agree. I haven't really seen that with case statements. I'm As always, sometimes as we come up with like the ideas, I sometimes start to get into my head of like, am I just making up a person?
Yeah, totally. I think on at the end of this one that my gut wouldn't be to violate this cop. Like my code would probably be very safe here,
Like
but
from
I'm
this, yeah.
not confident. Yeah, I'm not confident that there's not a good reason to or that to fully take away the ability to have that fall through behavior on the same condition is necessarily the right call.
True. All right. So, in the spirit of trying to make sure that we're more conservative than not, I guess it's disabled. And we did it. Um, that's all the new cops in RuboCop configured. So yeah, that's going to ship out to your Ruby gems sometime before the end of the day today, 5 o'clock Eastern. And that's kind of all that we need to do, except
Cool.
I like to release them all with a little emoji. So I asked you to choose an emoji, and you chose.
The seal.
Hey, why the seal?
Seal of approval.
Oh, okay, there you go. Succinct and short. I like it. Okie dokie.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This was really fun. And thanks for all your hard work on standard. It, like I said, it hasn't been necessarily on client projects I've been on yet, but I have gotten a lot of personal value out of it and really appreciate your hard work keeping this thing rolling.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on. It's more fun with friends, and everybody's so friendly at this company. So,
Couldn't agree more.
you can meet Daniel at RailsConf in Atlanta next week. It's next week.
It is next week.
Okay. I liked Atlanta. Every time I go, I have a nice time. So you all have a nice time there, and have a good rest of your day, everybody.